Welcome to the second episode of Momentum, a podcast series by HirePro. Here, we uncover strategies that make hiring fearless. I'm your host Megha, and today we have a distinguished guest, Mr. Ramesh MV, who is the Vice President of Strategy and Growth and Assessments HirePro. He holds multifunctional experience across various domains for over 20 years. His expertise lies in P&L management, strategy planning, financial modeling, and data analysis. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you, Megha. Glad to be here.
In today's episode, we will discuss growing importance of assessment in skill-based recruitment. Mr. Ramesh is a seasoned expert on the topic. We will have a deep discussion on assessments, how it is impacting the decision-making of candidate selection. Our recent HirePro report, No Resume Please, underscores a shift in talent acquisition. It suggests that the traditional resumes are diminishing and skill-based assessments are growing importance. How are companies adjusting to the growing importance of skill-based assessments and diminishing of the traditional resume qualifications?
So when we were working on this report, right, as the data input, we looked at more than 4 million data points, and we also spoke to hundreds of recruiters to understand what they are looking at when looking to hire a candidate for a particular job role. And what we found is that, according to most of the recruiters at least, a lot of the candidates put the resumes with unnecessary information, right? They claim to have a lot of skills which are not actually there. They claim expertise in areas which they have barely started to understand. They also talk about projects which they have not done. So we realized that at least half, or actually more than half of the recruiters believe that the resume which is in front of them is actually not a true reflection of the candidate's abilities. Apart from that, the requirements of a particular job role look at the behavioral attributes of the candidate, whereas most of the resumes do not mention any behavioral skills, or even if they mention, then there is a very long laundry list of behavioral attributes which are given, which cannot be vetted by the recruiter in any way. If you come to the technology part of it, then the recruiter who has an HR background is again not in a great position to evaluate the technical skills of the candidates. Apart from these two, there are also multiple reasons, like for instance, candidates who apply for jobs for which they may actually not be a good fit. So one of the data points which we presented in the report was that candidates on average apply for 150 job roles just to get a few interviews and think that, maybe I get an offer from this entire process. So because of all these reasons, the number of resumes which end up at the recruiter's desk is very, very high. And recruiters are unable to understand who is the right candidate to be pushed through to the next round, which is the technical interview or a more deeper interview. This is where the skill assessments have come in. So to evaluate a candidate's skill level, if you want to look at whether he's an expert, whether he's at an intermediate level, or whether he's at a beginner level, for any of the skills which he or she has claimed in the resume, you need to have an objective assessment. That is where, when we run a skill-based assessment, we understand how good the candidate is, and therefore whether the candidate is a good fit for this particular job role or not. So this is a big change which has come in the entire recruitment process. We increasingly see more and more companies using assessments as the first level filter. Don't rely on what the candidate has claimed in the resume, because there is no objective evaluation of what is there. However, an assessment score is a very, very clear indicator of what skills, what knowledge, and what level of expertise the candidate has. So this change is something which organizations across the world are adopting. And in India also, we increasingly see that these kinds of assessments are being put to use in a much more deeper and much more stronger way.
So you're talking about assessments. What are the primary objectives of assessments in recruitment, and what are the contributions in the hiring process?
So in India, if you see, primarily assessments are used as an elimination assessment rather than as a selection assessment. The reason for this is the number of applications which come through for any open position is generally very high. So recruiters focus on filtering the candidates out who are particularly bad and not suitable for that job role, rather than looking at who is an excellent candidate and therefore move them to the offer stage. So that is the primary use case in terms of filtering out the pipeline which is coming through. But apart from that, using an assessment can also be beneficial in other ways. For instance, very high quality candidates come through to the process. So you are saving a lot of interviewer time and effort. You are running the assessment in a very unbiased sort of way, because when the assessment is given, it is given to all the candidates in the process, irrespective of their background, their education, their religion or gender, or which state of the country they come from, or what regional languages they speak, and all of that. So the only filter which is happening there is whether the candidate has the right kind of skills or not. Plus, if you're looking at a very high volume hiring scenario, then assessments actually help very, very much, because the candidate flow coming through is very high. And therefore, you need a cheap and very clear cut, objective sort of process to be able to filter out the candidates. Candidates also like this because they know that they have a fair shot. It is not that you need to know the recruiter or you need to have some relative in the company to be able to get shortlisted for the next round. So they also feel that this is a good company who is looking at hiring the right talent rather than looking to hire someone they already know or something like that. So these are all the different advantages of using assessments in the recruitment process. And by using them, companies are able to harness these advantages naturally.
So, Ramesh, as you spoke about the advantages of assessments, can you share with us some various assessment types and their role in evaluating the candidate skills?
So assessments broadly, the way they are used in the market, there are 4 different categories, right? So one is the very basic cognitive skills of the candidate, which is understanding whether they are good in reasoning, whether they are able to logically think about a problem and try to arrive at a solution or not. Now, historically speaking, this has been one of the earliest use cases of assessments, when these assessments are scientifically proven to yield a very good results in terms of the candidates on the job performance. And surprisingly, they are not related to the specific skills needed for a job, but these are what are considered as horizontal skills. So a candidate good, having very strong cognitive abilities, is very likely to do a good job irrespective of the kind of job role they are being assigned to. And this has been proven by multiple studies which have happened across the world. So that is the first type of assessment, which are cognitive assessments. The second type of assessment is the communication assessments, right? So we want to understand whether the candidate is able to talk to others in the organization, understand what they are saying, be able to convey his point clearly, speak with customers, for instance, and be very clear in his communication or not. So all the assessments geared around that, including their writing skills, their listening skills, their reading skills, and their spoken skills. All of this come under the communication bucket. Then the next set is the domain-based assessments, right? And within that, there are 2 kinds. We look at specific skills which the job role requires. And for instance, within that, technical is a very big component of it. So any software developer role, for instance, if you consider, we want to understand whether the candidate can write code or not. And within that, again, there are different ways to assess. There are online platforms now where candidate can actually write code irrespective of what language they know, and showcase that, yes, they have the ability to solve problems. Similarly, for other domains, you have domain-specific areas which can come in. For instance, within banking, you may ask the candidate about questions about accounting or questions about specific to banking. For instance, we are talking about questions about things like credit cards or KYC process and things like that. In case the organization is a BPO or a KPO kind of organization, then there can be questions related to the specific process which is being run. Right? If it's an AR or an AP process which is being run at the back end, the candidate should have prior knowledge about what AR means and how it pertains to the organizational process. So this is the third type of assessment type, I would say, where specific skills are evaluated. The last one is the psychometric evaluations, right, or behavioral evaluations. So in a behavioral assessment, we are looking at understanding the candidate's personality and how it matches with the specific requirements of the job role. For instance, we may need a person to be very outgoing, be very comfortable interacting with strangers, which is typically what you would require a salesperson to do, right? So they have to be comfortable with cold calling, for instance. You need to be able to chat up someone new at a company whose lead you got through whatever reason, and we build a relationship with them and then be able to pursue that deal to closure. So candidates who are very introverted, for instance, may not be very comfortable doing this kind of a role. It's not a binary result there, but it is only an indication of whether the candidate would naturally feel comfortable doing that particular job role or not. So behavioral assessments look at understanding what personality the candidate has and how it fits into the requirements of that particular job role. It is not that there is only one kind of personality which is perfect for a job role. There can be different facets of it. And there are a lot of theories across the world which are used by psychometricians to understand a candidate's personality. So these are the four broad buckets which we see, and they are sort of self-explanatory in terms of what they contribute to the job process, right? So the behavioral assessment looks at whether the candidate's personality is a fit for the job or not. The skill assessments look at the candidate's knowledge and expertise, whether they can do the job or not. So the distinction you can see clearly that one is whether the candidate wants to do the job, one is whether the candidate can do the job or not. Then, of course, the communication piece is again a universal horizontal kind of a skill, and also the cognitive abilities. So these are the four different kinds of areas which assessments can be done. And for a particular job role, you may use a combination of these, right? For an entry-level sales roles, for instance, you may look at the communication assessment, the cognitive assessment, and the personality assessment, for instance. For a 10-year solution architect, you may very, very strongly focus only on the technical assessment, right? Without considering the other areas and so on. So depending upon the job role, depending upon what skills you want to evaluate, depending upon what behavior needs are there for the job role, whether they are the dominant attributes or whether having technical knowledge is the dominant requirement for that job role, all the factors like this would determine what combination of these areas would you build into an assessment.
Since you talked about the various assessment combinations and what recruiters actually look for in the candidates, can you help us know that how these assessments are evolving and in the ever-changing job market?
So if you look at the use of assessments, right? So one of the earliest use of assessments was by the US Army, who started using IQ assessments almost close to a century back now, right? Probably 80, 90 years back or so. From there today to looking at personality, communication, and technical skills in a very online, remote enabled way, right? So that's been a very long journey for assessments as such. And most of this journey actually has happened in the past couple of decades. Pen and paper assessments were the norm 80 years back, and they were the norm almost 20 years back as well. And that is where technology started coming in and making a big change in terms of evolution of assessments. So we went from pen and paper assessments to OCR kind of assessments, and from there we moved to computer-based assessments, to LAN-based assessments, and from there to completely remote online assessments, which is the phase which we are in right now. So there was a time when candidates had to walk into a customer's office, sit in their office and give an assessment to make sure that it is the right candidate. Today we have technology through which the candidate can give the assessment at home whenever they want. Maybe it's the middle of the night when they actually have free time to do that, and they can do it. And sitting remotely through proctoring technology, we can actually make sure that yes, this is the right candidate who is giving the assessment, and there is no help the candidate is receiving when the assessment is going on. So that is a very, very big change which has happened in terms of the convenience of the candidate becoming a factor in terms of the usage of assessments. In terms of delivery of assessments as well, there has been a change. Earlier, you needed very skilled and trained professionals only who could actually deploy the assessments, because the mass production of assessments was very rare. Now we have online technologies available. Every recruiter, you can sign up with the assessment service provider, and you can deliver assessments simultaneously to hundreds, thousands, or even millions of candidates simultaneously. You don't have to worry about booking a huge hall where 1,000 people will walk in. You can roll out an assessment to 1,000 candidates instantly, right? And they can take it up whenever it is comfortable for them. In terms of the technology itself, there have been again changes. If you look at psychometric assessments, for instance, there were written instruments with the output being actually having to be arrived at after multiple calculations and things like that. Now everything happens instantly because all that is already coded into the platform. So the speed with which you can evaluate candidates has significantly improved. Plus the ability to combine multiple assessments, right? With so many data points available to us, we are able to customize assessments to specific job roles very, very quickly, whereas earlier building an assessment would have taken a very long time. Now we have the data aggregation which we can do through using assessments across multiple use cases that helps us roll out an assessment also very, very quickly. So these are some of the changes which have happened if you look at the last 80, 90-year history of assessments which have been rolled out.
So, what are the modern assessment tools and techniques that are being used in the recruitment?
So within recruitment, we look at different areas where technology has come in, right? So one of the big areas, of course, which is the buzzword in the last 6 months or so, is AI, right? So AI use in assessments is increasingly increasing. They look at, there are different use cases even within assessments where AI has come in. I already spoke about proctoring technology, right? Earlier, it used to be there used to be a human evaluator who used to look at the candidate video feed, for instance, once the technology has been adopted, to look at whether any sort of cheating has happened. Now we have AI systems which can actually review the video and they can identify specific use cases of any sort of malpractice happening. AI can recognize if two people are looking at a screen and one of them is trying to help the other. It can go through audio which has been recorded and understand whether questions are being talked about or whether there is general chit chat happening in the background. So to differentiate between candidate who is getting some help and who is not getting some help. So proctoring technology is one of the biggest improvements which has happened in the last decade or so in terms of being able to remotely deliver assessments. The other area where technology has come in significantly is in terms of the evaluation of the candidates itself, particularly on the communication assessments. Earlier, you needed to have manual experts who can hear what a candidate is saying or go through the text which the candidate has written and then be able to understand or gauge the candidate's skill level in terms of language. Today, AI systems can do that. Right? With generative AI becoming so commonplace, I'm sure you would have also used ChatGPT and similar tools. The formation of text and to be able to understand how accurate the text is in terms of language, grammar, and things like that is very, very simple today. Right? So to be able to understand a candidate's communication skills when they are speaking or when they have written a long form essay or they've written an email, how good it is, how clear it is in terms of communication. Is it legible to understand? Are the readers of that passage likely to be impressed by that essay or not? So all of these parameters, AI has come in. So we use AI even at HirePro when we run our assessments. We use AI to do these evaluations, and we've seen that particularly in some instances, the score which the AI system can give is actually far more accurate than what a human evaluator can give. Because when given with high volume, the AI system doesn't get tired, it keeps on going, right? But when a human evaluator is given a lot of evaluations to do, generally we see over a period of time, while the initial period, the scores are fairly accurate, but after a while, the scores start becoming slightly deviating from what would have been an ideal score. So usage of technology in terms of evaluation of the candidate responses, that is another significant area where technology has come in.
I agree. I think the tool based assessments have taken a major shift in the recruitment business. So, how do these assessments provide a fair and unbiased evaluation according to you?
So this is one of the biggest use cases for assessments in the recruitment space, what we have been talking about, right? So as you know, increasingly there is very, very high focus on gender issues, increasing diversity in the workplace and things like that. So having a process which doesn't bring in any of these biases in terms of the selection of the candidate is very, very important. Now, the unfortunate problem is that biases can come in even without the interviewer knowing it, right? So, subconsciously, we may prefer a particular kind of candidate, maybe because they remind us of someone, maybe because they are from your own college, or maybe because they are from your own region, they speak a language similar to you. You may not be conscious that these kind of biases are acting, but studies have shown that inherently these biases do tend to create some sort of an uneven playing field for the candidates. So by using assessments, what we are doing is we are taking away the human element out of it, at least in the initial phase of the process. So what that does is it looks at the candidate. So for instance, today in HirePro, if we want to roll out an assessment, we actually don't need any information about the candidate. All we need is an email ID, which you can create with whatever name you want. You may be Superman at the rate Gmail or whatever it is. All you need is to get the test credentials. And once you have those credentials, it is up to you. It is up to your skill. It is up to your knowledge. And whatever you have claimed in your resume versus whatever is required for the job role. If the fit is there, if you have the required skills, then you get through to the next process. Right? So what this does is, at the first stage, where you are clearly looking for skill-based evaluations, where you are saying that I want only the best of the lot who has applied for this position to go through to the next round, there we are removing the chance of any sort of bias coming. After that, of course, you still again have interviews, and there you can certainly look at a diversified candidate profile which is coming through, and that should ideally result in better hiring outcomes for you as well. Now, this is where technology also has to be a little bit carefully used, right? Because we spoke about AI,
Right.
the kind of models which AI is trained upon, that also may have inherent biases. There is a very classic, not I wouldn't say classic, but there's a very known example of one of the large US companies building an AI system for recruitment, and the data it was fed was about the data of the existing employees as being good hires. And what the system did was it looked at the profile of the existing employees and it started rejecting candidates who were not fitting that profile. Now, in reality, what that meant was that a lot of women who were applying for technical roles were automatically getting rejected because the existing technical employees were predominantly male. Now, so the AI system, which you would have thought that, because it is technology and it has to be completely unbiased, even their bias is coming in because of the data it is being fed. So there has to be care taken in terms of how you are using technology as well. But assessments provide one of those cases where you can very, very strongly ensure that no sort of bias is coming in. The way I was talking about initially, where all you need is an email address, which can be any kind of email address. And once you take the assessment, the none of the parameters, none of the background parameters of the candidate are actually at play. What is at play is how they did in the assessment and what score they have got, how they have fared relatively compared to the other candidates who are in the pool, and that should be good enough for their selection.
Since the AI and the ChatGPT have become the talk of the town, what are the anticipated future trends in the recruitment assessments?
So we already spoke about AI coming into the recruitment process, different places where it is making an impact. Specifically, proctoring and evaluation of candidates is something which we have already seen. Now, one of the areas where we have not seen the impact being very high is the test design process. Today's process are very job specific. Actually, a lot of the assessment service providers in the market, if you see, they have standard assessments which are used irrespective of the situation for which the customer wants to run the assessment. There are some organizations which run very customized assessments for each particular job role. But what we have not seen happen is an assessment being customized to a candidate's specific skills. Right? So sometimes you come to a scenario where you see a good resume, the candidate is good, but there may not be an exact match for that particular candidate in terms of the roles which you have open in the organization. What you want to do in that situation is to thoroughly evaluate the candidate on the skills the candidate has, and then be able to find the right match for that particular candidate within the organization. So both these areas, AI can definitely be of help. Right? In terms of dynamically being able to build a custom assessment, looking at the different skills the candidate has claimed in their resume, and then build an assessment which is very unique to that particular candidate, in terms of the skills, in terms of the knowledge he has claimed, or maybe even dynamically create questions which mix the candidate's past experiences and try to see how they fit in with the current situation in the client organization where those skills may be applicable and so on. What that can do is that can actually give you a very, very deep insight into how the candidate may create an impact for your organization. And when the candidate is onboarded, what could be the best areas where the candidate's skills and talents can be used. So this level of individualized assessment creation or individualized evaluation of candidates to see how they can be made to be fit is eventually going back to that initial point which you talked about, where assessments are used as elimination tools rather than being selection tools. But with AI increasingly becoming more and more intelligent, we can actually see that situation where we can start using these as selection-based assessments, where you look at a candidate's resume, you look at what he has claimed, you do a 360-degree evaluation of the candidate using AI, and then without having any sort of human intervention, we are able to say that yes, this candidate will be a good fit for these kind of job roles in the organization, and therefore we can just go ahead and even roll out an offer without a human being on the other side as well. We are certainly not there today, but I don't think the day is very far when we can actually get there. So I think a lot of time, of course, can be saved in terms of interviewer effort, whether them not having to be able to judge a candidate as being fit or not. Eventually, I think AI is going to end up doing all of this.
Interesting. So, just a last question. How are these trends reshaping the way assessments are conducted, and what are the potential benefits or challenges that the recruiters might face?
Yeah, so recruiters are actually at a very interesting junction, right? So they are trying to run the process. So they have the dual objectives of one, trying to fulfill the positions which they have been given, and two, finding the right quality, right? So in that sense, they are usually a little bit at loggerheads with the hiring manager, saying that, why don't you consider this candidate? He seems to be good. You should just go ahead and hire. Whereas the hiring manager focus is primarily on quality, that if I don't get the right quality, there is no point hiring this candidate and so on. But with technology coming in, recruiters can actually use it to their advantage. They can use assessments to go through a much larger pool of candidates than what they're able to go through today. Just by using assessments, like I said earlier, you can run thousands of candidates to fit a particular job role, rather than looking at individual candidate resumes and going through 10 or 15 candidates. That gives you a much larger pool of qualified and people with the right skills who you can put in front of the hiring manager. So obviously it can lead to reduction in your hiring times if you use technology in the right way. But like I said, eventually you can actually look at a position where the recruiter runs the process. There may not even be a hiring manager involvement because technology has developed so much and it is being put to use in the right way, that without a human intervention on the other side, the recruiter is able to fulfill these positions as well, right? Of course, that is the eventual utopia you're looking at. But then recruiters may also have the question that, does this make my own job redundant? If AI is so good in terms of doing the initial filtering, if AI is so good in terms of evaluating a candidate's skills, does that mean that eventually I will get replaced myself? And that's a very valid sort of question for recruiters to ask. We can't be sure what will be the answer there, but there are certainly elements in terms of evaluating a candidate's personality, right? The gut feel you get when you talk to a candidate, the likelihood of the candidate joining your organization, right? So there are still a lot of elements there which are today at least difficult for technology to crack, and certainly need the recruiter to be on their A game to be able to evaluate some of those things. But I think for the recruiter who knows how to channelize technology for their use case, I think they are the ones who are going to be really, really grateful that some of these changes have come into the recruitment process.
Thank you, Ramesh, for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Megha. It was great being here.
And for our listeners, stay tuned for more such thought-provoking sessions at Momentum. Until then, please share, like, and subscribe.